Tonight we're based at London's small but perfectly formed city airport, built on the old Royal Docks. A little later, Vicky Kimm experiences its unique approach. Julian Tutt becomes the first civilian to fly the Navy's newest helicopter. And our aspiring airline pilots begin their flight training in Arizona. But first, to America for the biggest gathering of Mustangs since the Korean War. The P-51 Mustang is not only considered to be the best all-round fighter of the Second World War, but has now become one of the great aircraft icons of the 20th century. To celebrate this amazing machine, there was a unique event in Kissimmee, Florida, the gathering of Mustangs and legends. Kissimmee Municipal Airport is normally home to just 2 P-51s, but on this occasion, Kissimmee is host to over 60 Mustangs. That's right, 60 that are flown in from all over the United States to celebrate this glorious machine and the quite remarkable men that flew them. Not since the Korean War had so many Mustangs been brought together.
Well, I've never seen anything like it. Even the 50th anniversary of World War II at Oshkosh, they had a greater group of aircraft, but I've never seen so many Mustangs. It's like, I feel like a kid in a candy store.
The reason the Mustang is held in such esteem is that it was the aircraft that changed the course of the Second World War. Though the Spitfire and Hurricane were excellent fighters, the Mustang had a revolutionary range. You could put a big old 550-pound bomb here if you wanted to, or one of these jettisonable fuel pods, which once you used the fuel, you pulled a lever and let it go. Now this enabled this great aircraft to escort our bombers all the way from England, deep into Germany and back again, taking care of any enemy fighters they found en route. The aircraft have now all been given individual names by their owners, whose relationship with their aircraft is nothing less than a love affair.
Every time I fly the airplane, I fall deeply in love with it again. You know, you can get away from it for a month or so, and you know, and you kind of get away from it and it doesn't bother you. But every time I walk in my hangar, I always give it a pat and a hug and talk to my airplane. It's been a good airplane.
But the idea of the meeting wasn't just to get the aircraft together on the ground. The point was to fly them. And I was invited for a ride in one of the few remaining two-seat Mustangs. Crazy horse.
So even though I'm sitting in the back here where normally they'd have a fuel tank, I can really get the feeling of what it must have been like to be a 19-year-old kid who's just sitting here in his P-51D and is about to go off on his first combat mission. I mean, phew, where's the gun button?
Okay, we're going to wind them up. And Kissimmee Tower, start frame about 10 degrees inbound from the sheriff's frame. And tower like confirm, Mustang 015 is 3015.
I was being flown by event organizer Lee Louderback, and on our wing was Elliot Cross in Mad Max.
What a gorgeous looking aircraft old Mad Max is. She's about 10 feet away there off my starboard wing. That has to be one of the greatest sights in aviation.
But this wasn't just some Sunday school outing. Lee wanted to put the plane through its paces. We were going to loop the loop.
And up we go. Oh yes, this is what it's all about. Horizontal throttle, level the wing. Down into the dive. Following the line feature, that's nigh on perfect. And ease out of the dive. We went into our own buffet. That's fantastic. And up into a slow roll. We pick up our line feature. Outrageous! You can't ask for much more than that.
As well as bringing the planes together, the gathering of Mustangs and legends also assembled an illustrious group of famous flyers, including Chuck Yeager, Bob Hoover and Frank Borman.
Did you ever think you'd ever see so many deadheads in one bunch? All of them flying Mustangs.
Andy, I don't know how you ever made it.
How about
you?
Probably an hour and a half, just painted.
Chuck Yeager, the first man to break the sound barrier, is just one of the pilots who began their career on Mustangs. Aged 19, he and his wingman, Bob Anders, were flying missions over Nazi Germany. General, what particular characteristics about the P-51 struck you as being most remarkable when you first
Well,
read
8 hours of range,
Yes.
428 miles an hour speed, 650s with a 30-second firepower load of ammunition. That was the most impressive. And a lead computing gun sight and a G-suit, which gave us the capability of shooting down 109s and 190s while pulling 6 Gs, where as the German pilots didn't get, or the Spit pilots didn't get G-suits during World War II. We did. It made a big difference.
When we finally got enough airplanes over there, we could take the bombers from the entry into enemy territory, take them to the target, bring them all the way out. We could stay with them the entire time, wherever they wanted to go in Europe.
Although the Mustang is celebrated as an all-American hero, a key element of the plane's performance was its British-designed Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. Another war veteran was the highest-scoring Tuskegee Airman, Colonel Lee Archer.
The first aircraft that we had the Allison in it, and this is probably sacrilege to the American industry, but as far as I was concerned, it wasn't worth a hoot. And the airplane really showed its stuff when we got the Rolls-Royce in the Maryland. I knew the Rolls-Royce people were here. I wanted to tell them thank you, because many of those little beseechments I made in the aircraft, sweetheart, get me back again. Don't let me down now. That was talking to the engine in that bird. Keep it going.
Lee Archer also recalled the race issue that almost stopped him and others from flying.
My father thought I was an idiot. He said, they don't want you, don't go. He says, why should you? Stay in college and do what you're supposed to do. And truthfully, I would have paid them to let me fly.
Yeah.
And then when we got into this bird, they could have collected high money in ransom from me. I just thought this was the greatest thing in the world.
But at the end of the day, it was the planes that stole the show. When it opened in 1987, London City was a new type of airport. Whilst most new airports were having to be built miles away from the centres they serve, this one was located right in the heart of the city. But there is a price to pay for proximity. Noise abatement procedures make this a unique approach, and one that requires very special skills. We sent Vicky Kimm to fly in.
This is a British Aerospace 146 of CityJet, preparing to leave Dublin for London City. In charge of the tricky approach today is Captain George Lee.
The main problem is the fact that you're coming into an extremely small airfield with a very short runway. You're coming over highly congested areas. They don't want to hear all the noise. But you've got to make an approach which is safe from a passenger's point of view, and at the same time stop the aircraft in a very short runway. The passengers will undoubtedly find the first part of the approach much steeper than when making an approach normally on a 3-degree approach path. They tend to feel that they're leaning forward, and it's almost as if they're on a dive attack.
Powered by 4 turbofans, the 146 is specially designed for quiet operation and short takeoff and landing. It was the introduction of these jets in 1992 that transformed the fortunes of London City. Previously, only slower propeller-driven aircraft had been able to fly in.
It's a really short flight from Dublin. We're already beginning the descent. I'm quite curious to see just how steep it really is.
The key difference about the London City approach is the angle of descent. Usually aircraft come in at 3 degrees, but at London City it's 6.
The first part of a steep approach is to maintain the appropriate speed during the approach itself. Clearly, coming downhill more steeply, the aircraft tends to accelerate. This you can't afford to allow to happen because you have the problem of stopping it. The second problem is a question of changing the attitude and the flight path of the aircraft at the right point so that you land on the end of the runway within the designated area.
As a passenger, it really did feel like we were dive bombing the airfield, and it was far more exciting than the average airliner landing. And after flaring the aircraft, George's next job was to stop. But even with noise regulations banning reverse thrust, the 146 can still come to a halt within half the modest runway length of 1,200 metres. As we slowed, it was amazing to think that we'd landed just a few miles from the heart of the City of London.
The unpredictability of the British weather may be great for conversation, but it's a major frustration for pilots. In Arizona, however, it's always hot and sunny, perfect for pilot training.
Phoenix, Arizona, one of the hottest places on Earth and a long way from home for a group of raw British Airways cadets. Last week we saw their introduction to the airline. They've spent a month in the classroom back in England, but now they've come here to get their hands on a real aircraft. They've come to Williams Gateway Airport for guaranteed good weather and loads of hard work. The youngest in this group is Kirsty Johnston, who, although she's only 19, already has a private pilot's licence and 150 hours flying experience. Today she's preparing for a solo cross-country flight which will take her on a challenging 100-mile route across the featureless Arizona desert. Meanwhile, her colleague Ed is also about to take off, covering another section of the course known as Advanced Handling with his instructor Ben. All the time he's learning how to fly the aircraft more proficiently.
Okay, feet off brakes, flight full power, right runner, suctions within limits, airspeed is alive, rotate, and pitching 75 knots.
And just behind Ed is Kirsty, leaving on her solo cross-country. Because of the heat, the students start flying at around 5 a.m. If it gets too hot, this Piper cadet might not get off the ground at all. She's now got nothing but a compass and a chart to navigate her way to an airport 65 miles away. Most of the time, she should be flying straight and level, unlike Ed.
Okay, we're about to demonstrate a steep turn, and remember that as we increase the angle of bank, the back pressure required increases due to the loss of vertical component of lift, and we bring it 360 degrees around the corner. Okay, you have control. Why don't you do one to the left first?
Okay. Clear to the left.
Area is clear on the left-hand side.
To the right as well, because we will be doing a full 360. And you can make the turn now.
Ed will spend much of his 2 months here flying this sort of manoeuvre again and again until he can do it in his sleep. Hopefully not literally.
We lead our rollout by roughly half of our angle of bank, and during the turn we increase the power because the drag is increased.
Sure.
Because our lift is increased, correct?
Correct. Predict the rollout.
I have the controls?
You have control.
Okay, very nice job. You maintained your altitude plus or minus 50 feet. And we continued around the turn, rolled out on our entry headings plus or minus 10 degrees, as well as our altitudes plus or minus 50 feet, which is very, very nice, well within standards.
Unity traffic, Cadet 121 November Delta, entry me southeast practice area, transiting to Coolidge at 5,500 feet, currently at 4,500 feet, climbing. Any other traffic, please advise.
Coolidge Airfield looks like it's in the middle of nowhere, because it is. But it's Kirsty's first checkpoint and she's got to land there. Navigating without the modern age she'll find in airliners is another vital part of her training, and having come all this way, not even a cup of tea awaits. Ed, meanwhile, is about to stall. He's got to. It's a vital part of learning what to do if things go wrong when coming into land.
Okay, you have the controls.
I control.
Once we stabilize at 70 knots, set the pitch nose up, simulating we lost visual with the runway, cloud, rain, fog, some other obstruction.
So we've got 70 knots, and we lose sight of the runway for some reason. Aircraft pitches up.
Look outside, keep the pitch the same, just like you do for all the traffic patterns that you fly.
And yes, speed's coming off. Turn nose down, and we want to pitch.
And drag flap away immediately.
Drag flap away. 63 knots is what we're pitching for. And we'll lose the flaps in stages, and want to pitch for 75. And climb out of the turn, out of the stall.
Okay, very nice job, Ed.
Thank you.
Okay, you have the controls?
I have control.
Why don't you take us for a descent into Williams Gateway for a full stop landing?
Eventually, Kirsty is rewarded for all her navigation effort by flying past some spectacular scenery on her way to her final checkpoint, yet another airfield.
Cascante, Cadet 121 November Delta, mile to the north at 5,500 feet. Cascante.
In the 2 months they're here, these recruits will fly around 70 hours in these trainers, and at the end of the course, basic flying skills should become second nature to them.
A little bit slow. Straight out departure approved. Okay. Get a bit more power in there.
Bonanza 260 Alpha Alpha, San Dan, have X-ray, inbound full stop.
Don't forget though, these are young students abroad, and their barbecues have acquired legendary status in Arizona, though this is much more than an aviating Club 1830.
Real man's food, that is.
You just got to look around. They really enjoy themselves here. They have a good time. The Americans are very, very friendly and they welcome them.
It's great. Absolutely fantastic.
Out
in Arizona. Group of decent people.
Working really hard.
Oh, yes.
What I've enjoyed most definitely been the navigation. We've certainly had more opportunity to get out and see different airports.
Working with Ben, you always sort of learn something on every lesson.
We cram so much into a very small period of time, and then after that they know everything. They just take it from there and build upon what they already know.
And also dealing with the temperature, also the turbulence and the temperature, they're not used to that being 112, 110 degrees.
We'll be a bit sad to go, but Oxford's where we've got to spend the rest of the year, so
experience
we'll have to get on with it.
But soon they'll leave this place and travel home, where next week we'll see one of the toughest flying tests around, the infamous instrument rating.
The last thing you expect to see over the Thames is the Royal Navy's newest and largest helicopter. But a few days ago, the Airshow was exclusively invited to be on board the massive Merlin as it made its first deck landing in public on HMS Grafton. Despite its size, the Merlin is reputed to have the manoeuvrability and handling of the Lynx. Who better to test the aircraft at the Airshow than Julian Tutt?
The Airshow has already notched a few firsts in its short history, and we claimed another recently when I became the first civilian to fly the Royal Navy's latest helicopter, being put through its paces by 700 Elms Squadron at Culdrose in Cornwall. The M, by the way, stands for Merlin. You may recall, if you watched the first series of the Airshow, in the very first programme, we flew the prototype G-AWNH when it was still at Westlands, and it was an impressive aircraft then. But this is a totally different kettle of fish. The in-service Merlin with its full avionics fit and all the sonar and so on round the back. I think we're going to be pretty impressed with it. Flying today with the Squadron QHI and senior pilot, Lieutenant Commander Nick Dunn. After just a few minutes in the air, Nick let me take over. Control. Sports car acceleration. Does actually handle very much like a Lynx. Well, for a huge machine, it feels like a much lighter helicopter to manoeuvre. The pilots at 700 Squadron grow more impressed with each test flight. Powered by 3 Rolls-Royce Turbomaker engines, the Merlin can lose one and still be fully operational. With its superb airframe and advanced avionics, the whole package is a big leap forward compared with the Lynx and Sea King, and even the fixed-wing Nimrod. 700 Squadron is only formed to test new aircraft. In the 50s it wrote the book for the Sea King. In the 70s it did the same for the Lynx. Now it's the turn of the Merlin, and ours are the first cameras ever to be allowed behind the scenes. In charge of the squadron is Lieutenant Commander Phil Shaw.
We've taken the first few aircraft to be delivered to the Navy in order to evaluate them, what the capability of the aircraft is, both in terms of the airframe and also the operational capability. And it's our job to, over the next 2 years, to learn how to fight the machine in order to pass that on to the first frontline squadron, which forms in 2001.
Now, talking about the G-AWNH as it was originally, it was accused by many in the early stages particularly of being a complete white elephant. Is that still the case?
Certainly not, no. I mean, it's a hugely capable aeroplane. I've flown Sea King prior to this aircraft, and also Lynx. And despite its size, it's 1.5 times the weight of a Sea King. It handles more like a Lynx, and its mission capability is absolutely enormous. It beats the pants off of anything else that we've got.
After the morning's general handling flight, Phil invited me to join them on a typical mission. But first, I took a closer look on the ground. About 80% of the aircraft fuselage is made of a composite material, a mixture of carbon fibre, and up here, very strong Kevlar. It's all much lighter than the traditional aircraft alloy metal. The main rotor head, incredibly, is also made of composite materials, unlike the Lynx, which has got a solid titanium block. And the huge rotor blades, also of composite materials, have a unique anti-icing system, as does the tail rotor. The main bit that's metal still is the tail boob here. It has to be, because the huge forces generated within the aircraft have to be dissipated by a ripple effect in the metal, and composite material won't do that. It's actually a very, very simple and clean cockpit. With this box of tricks here, the Common Control Unit, or CCU, absolutely vital. That's where all the computers are operated from. We've got a very natty little switch down here, the ASCR, the Active Control System Response. And with that on, almost all the vibration goes. Fantastic. Welcome to the capacious back end. This huge space in the back will actually be filled by passive sonar buoys, which are dispensed through 2 holes at the back here, and an active dipping sonar lowered from a 60-foot hover through this hole in the floor here, all of it to detect submarines. Or in the space of 2 hours, that can all be stripped out, replaced by seats for 20 fully laden troops. Incredibly flexible.
The surface wind.
Then it was time for our mission briefing.
17 knots.
The aim of today's series is to conduct a surfex with HMS Grafton. The situation, Red Land is at war with Blue Land, and effectively they're taking a hold of the Isle of Wight.
The aim of the exercise was to test the Merlin's data link system. This is the most advanced aid of its kind in the world, and allows the Merlin to transmit radar information directly to its mothership, other friendly ships and the shore, without clogging up slower radio links. Although the system had been tested successfully in Scotland a few weeks previously, the squadron was still anxious about its operation this afternoon.
Remember the days of trench warfare when they used to put up balloons to have a look over the hill for the artillery? Well, that's what the Merlin does for the Navy. It's the ship's eyes and ears. But it increases the ship's field of view by over 200 miles.
In a recent exercise, the Merlin managed to hunt down a submarine twice as fast as a Nimrod and 4 times as quickly as a Sea King.
There's HMS G-AWNH. She's the Type 23 destroyer that we're working with this afternoon. We'll be enhancing her radar pattern, identifying friendly ships and hopefully the enemy ships, and then passing that information back via data link.
Yeah, the advantage is, whereas before I had to concentrate a lot of my efforts and ability, if you like, on physically driving the aircraft around the sky and all the airmanship aspects, and now a whole load of that can be downloaded to the pilot now. He can actually drive me around the sky. He's got the full picture that I've got in front of him, which we've never had before.
Probably one of the reasons why this is all so much more compacted, apparently simpler than earlier aircraft, is this common control unit. There's an awful lot of kit in here, isn't there?
You control your displays, the data link, everything that you do can be controlled through here. When I need to home the contact, I just dial it in and engage it, and away we go.
As the other Merlin identified possible targets, we were sent to find them.
So we'll now go to 3716, so we just investigate. Tactical item 3716, enter, enter, job done.
And the aircraft now flies itself from that one. I must say it's a very weird feeling going at 130 knots at 200 feet above the sea without any hands on.
Yeah, it's great.
The Merlin is designed to be operated by a crew of just 3, compared with 12 on a Nimrod.
There's the designated target in the right 2 o'clock.
That all seemed to work pretty well, Nick.
Very early days yet for us to link work, but already it seems to be proving its worth. It's worth its weight in gold.
The Merlin has an endurance of 4 hours, giving it 2.5 hours on task. That, combined with its outstanding performance and advanced avionics, mean the Navy believes it's got a world beater on its hands.
Sadly, that's it for tonight, but do join us again next week. From London City Airport, bye-bye.
On the next show, the story of the ferry pilots who fly single-engined across the Atlantic. The final flight of an original 747. And I fly in one of Britain's greatest classics, the Fairy Swordfish.